Welcome back to another UNC Tar Heels basketball recruiting podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you are watching us on our super fast growing YouTube channel, that is called Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of basketball recruiting, longtime college AAU and high school coach, Mr. David Sisk. And David, we are here to discuss big, supremely big basketball recruiting news for Carolina. Zayden High, a 6'10", 225-pounder, class of 2023 from Chandler, Arizona. He has announced that he will attend North Carolina. This has been an interesting recruitment that took a little bit of a different path here in the last couple of weeks. I would say that his official visit to North Carolina, the weekend of the Virginia Tech football game, obviously was huge in him coming to a decision maybe sooner than a lot of people originally thought he would. So, David, your thoughts on Zayden High popping for the Tar Heels?
Well, first of all, this is obviously a position that stretched big that North Carolina, Hubert Davis has been trying to fill for a number of months. You know, and you really go back with this recruitment for this position, it didn't start with Zayden High, and the family realizes that. He realized it, and they were fine with it. And I think that was one thing that really went in North Carolina's favor, was they understood, number one, the nature of the business, and number two, how important getting an offer from a University of North Carolina basketball program was. It started out with Gigi Jackson, and we won't go through that again, but, he decommits. And then there were two offers that went out, TJ Power and Zayden High. And TJ Power commits to Duke. That leaves Zayden High. He was the only player North Carolina, after all that, North Carolina was recruiting in the 2023 class. Hubert Davis could go in there and say, look, we're not recruiting anybody else after all this happened. You're the only guy. This is the only position. So he could feel that importance from North Carolina, even maybe if it was a process of elimination. But you've got a player now in the Hubert Davis era, the 46th ranked player. I believe that's the number. I don't have it in front of me, of the 20,
number 46
of the 2023 class. And I was doing a little research last night. Of the 6 players, high school players that have come in the Hubert Davis era, he is the third highest ranked player of the 6. Number 1 would be Simeon Wilcher. Number 2 would be Seth Trimble. Number 3 would be Zayden High. So a good get, really a good outside shooter, that stretch guy, but he does more than that. His high school coach tells me he's the best passer on the team. We've got from several scouting reports that we've done on Rivals and others, he's noted as a strong rebounder too. So, his high school coach told me, hey, if you just consider him a stretch big, you're not giving him his due diligence. He does a lot of things on the court. So a good pickup from North Carolina.
Interesting, too, that you say that, because I just spent time with Hubert Davis and some of the Tar Heels at the ACC tip-off in Charlotte, and I talked to Hubert about Pete Nance and what Pete Nance brings. And Hubert said right out of the gate, he said, it is a disservice for anyone to expect Pete Nance to be Brady Manick, because Pete Nance, he basically said he does more in his game. And he talked about that low post component in his game, the rebounding, the ability to defend down low. And my understanding, and I'm sure you could back this up as well, is that there is an appeal. He wanted the stretch guy, but they learned the night against Kansas to the national title game, you have to have a couple of guys that can defend down low. Because when Armando Bacot left the game, David McCormick just turned and scored right over Manick. No disrespect to Manick at all, but they want someone else that can body down there. And so when looking at Zayden High, he kind of, to me, fits a little bit more in the Pete Nance mold of a stretch four, of a guy who can stretch but isn't always a stretch guy.
The thing, though, is his big area improvement that he is going to have is probably going to come in the weight room. To be able to have that body. Nance is, you look at him and his body's different than Manick's. It's thin. So you ask Manick to guard a 5, and it's probably not fair to him because, he obviously didn't have the girth that Armando Bacot did. But you look at Nance fit both the best of both worlds because, he could stretch the floor, but he's got that body that can step in there and bang down on a post too. High is a little, he's more leaner right now. He's more on the Manick side, but he is just, starting his senior year of high school. So with these kids, you've always got to look at what are they going to look like 2 or 3 years, and that's always, so you've got to picture Zayden High as a 20-year-old, not as a 17-year-old, and
he was it. Go ahead.
We don't know what that, we don't know what that looks like, but he's about 220, 225 now. So, could get that size probably up to about 235, 240. That's not a huge stretch. But one thing too, you got to think about with this North Carolina roster moving forward, not this year, but moving forward, because things take a drastic turn after this season because they basically played the same starting lineup for 3 years now. So after that's done and several of these players move on, what does the next era of North Carolina basketball under Hubert Davis look like, and who's going to play that 4? And, when you've got Jalen Washington, Tyler Nickel could step up and play that spot. And we look at maybe Dontre Styles, it's going to be interesting where they go because they've got a number of candidates to play that spot. And so, and they all offer things. Styles may be more athletic, whereas High stretches the floor. And according to Hubert Davis, Jalen Washington shoots the ball as well as anybody that had there. So it's going to be interesting to see where all these guys fit and where North Carolina goes with it, because they definitely got the players who can play that role or try to play that role. So who survives?
Zayden High was in Chapel Hill a couple of weeks ago. It was the weekend of the Virginia Tech football game, and it was a miserable weekend. That was when the Hurricane Ian, the remnants from that was coming through. And usually when a hurricane comes through, it's not chilly. It's usually a little bit on the warm to humid side, but it was chilly that weekend. And I looked down and saw Zayden High with the basketball players. The basketball players hang out at the ground level underneath the blue zone. So if you're a Carolina fan, you go to a football game. If you want to know where they are, that's where they are. And Zayden High stuck out. I know Kevin Roy, our photographer, got a bunch of pictures of him, and he's got a hoodie on and he's all bundled up because it was in the 50s. That was a 3:30 game. So by the time halftime hit, it was in the 50s, and he's from Chandler, Arizona. And I was wondering, okay, how is this going to play out for him? So obviously,
he's actually from San Antonio. From the San Antonio.
Yes, San Antonio. Yeah.
But San Antonio and Phoenix are both. That's where he goes to school there nowadays. Campus Prep. Those are both hot.
Yeah,
go ahead.
San Antonio is, but it's not as warm, I guess, as Phoenix in the winter, but it's still very, very warm there. It certainly wasn't like what he experienced the early October in Chapel Hill, which was a rare time in Chapel Hill. So clearly, Hubert did a terrific job of selling him. It was a fantastic visit. The kids, I'm sure, said, hey, this is pretty atypical for this time of year. So what do you know about the visit, and what in the visit maybe sped this thing up? Because for a while there was a thought that perhaps this was going to be a spring decision, or maybe a right before signing day in November decision. What sped up this process for him?
I think him seeing just the type of priority that he was for North Carolina. I think that's the big, like I said, I think it's big that he was the only player that they had, that they were recruiting. That's one thing. And I know that they were really wanted to see that visit. They said that early on, that the dad told me, look, we've never been to North Carolina. We're excited to see what not only the school and program offers, but what the region offers. We've never been to the state. So they were excited about that. And they'd been talking about that visit, since early on in that recruitment. They really wanted to get there, So I think, obviously, they love what they saw. They love that the emphasis that Hubert Davis was putting on Zayden. But the other thing too is, and I think we got to mention this, I do think some of the other programs had players at similar positions that maybe had already committed, or they were recruiting maybe 2 or 3 players at one time. That was kind of like that. You know, I'd heard that he really wanted to get to Arkansas, but Arkansas was kind of looking some other directions. And then Texas was kind of in the same boat. You know, that was the home state there and for him originally, but he never took an official visit. And then, you know, even I think Michigan had backed off just a little bit because, and it was no knock on him, but, you know, North Carolina's been here before where you offer a couple of players at similar positions and you've got to make a choice, and you may feel better about one player than the other one. So you say, we got to go on then. Maybe this guy, we feel like we can get him, or this guy was a better fit. So, you know, you have a number of things there, but in the end, I think the bottom line was North Carolina here in the last few weeks have been recruiting him harder than anybody else. And I think he sees that. So if that's the case, why extend it? You know, he liked what he saw on the visit. The commitment comes 2 weeks afterwards, and he saw that, I mean, you can do a lot worse in North Carolina. So, I mean, you're talking about the blue blood, the only blue blood that they had offered him. And then that was the school that was recruiting him the hardest. So, you know, it just wasn't lip service. You know, a lot of times, you know, North Carolina could offer, and they've done it before. You know, they've done, and then they've kind of cooled off. They don't recruit players hard. And that's basically a way of saying, hey, you know, I know you've got a scholarship, but you really don't have a scholarship. And that wasn't the case with Zayden. So it was the best offer. They were recruiting him the hardest. Why wait?
Yeah, it's a hot program right now. It's a hot program on so many levels. Even at the ACC tip-off, they were the it guys where they were there. So I would imagine that just all the dudes that are back helped recruit him there as well. When we some of the photos we got, he's standing next to Caleb Love and Leaky Black and Dontrez Styles. I mean, that's when you're prioritized like that, and you've got that group there in that program, and it is a hot program right now. And then Hubert Davis's unique message, which is genuine. I've come to believe strongly that it's very genuine. That's a tough thing to turn down for a basketball player, I would imagine.
Yeah, and it for me, if I'm a basketball player, North Carolina would be hard to turn down anyway. You know, and that's been the case since I was, you know, young enough to keep up with basketball a million years ago. Now, I know you said if you had a chance, you'd go to Miami for totally different reasons than athletics, but or academics. But you would not be a student athlete. You would be the antithesis of a student athlete.
Full disclosure, that was born out of a conversation we had before we started taping this, because I was in Miami last weekend for football. So
yeah.
Well, I think when you, and we'll end with this part here. When you go back to the reaction to Gigi Jackson decommitting and moving on to where the program is now, where this class is now, I would think that the fans should be quite pleased, because as talented as Gigi is, I think it's safe to say that Zayden High is not a one and done guy. So Hubert loves the program guys. He'll take some one and dones, but he also loves the program guys he can get in there and develop, and they can stick around and do some tangible stuff there. I think they have that.
Let me add this, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'll totally forget about it when we move on to something else. Gigi Jackson reclassified. Yeah. North Carolina did not need him this year.
Yeah. And
they really did. They don't. And I don't care how good he is. And, you know, we had talked about that if Gigi stayed, that it would be important that if he did, that he come next year, not this year, because you got your guy, you at that spot in Nance, he's experienced, he's a fifth-year guy. And I've said this all along. I would like to see rankings done, team rankings, and nobody does this in any of the companies, where you include the high school guys and the transfers. Now, I understand it's apples and oranges. So it'd be hard enough. I would not want the job of doing Rivals Top 150. That would not be a reward, okay? But if I had to put the transfers in there as well and say, okay, here's top 150, 250 players, I mean, how do you look at a guy as a one and done and compare that to a fifth-year transfer? That's probably a little bit easier. I could probably compare Nance to Jackson, and I'll be honest, I just think in the long run, I'd rather have, not in the long run, in the short run, in 1 year, I'd rather have Nance, not in the long term.
Every time.
Yeah, fifth-year guy. But now you start looking at guys that like Zayden High that you expect to be at North Carolina for 3 or 4 years, a program guy. So it's so different. And then you're trying to mesh all that together. It would be tough to make that comparison, a one and done guy in Jackson, a fifth-year transfer in Nance, or like Brady Manick was, or a program guy that's there 3 or 4 years like Zayden High. So you've got the total mesh there of different experiences now you have in college basketball in 2022.
Well, you know how a lot of people are doing NIL player evaluations, like projected evaluations now?
Yeah.
How about a projected evaluation of a class? So if you had a GG Jackson who's there 1 year, let's say you didn't reclassify and came in the class of 23, he's there 1 year and he goes, what does he give you? Well, maybe there's more value in bringing in a Zayden High because he's going to give the program ultimately a lot more than GG Jackson would. So his projected evaluation as a college player, in my view, might be greater than someone like GG.
Yeah, and that's a good way of looking at it, over time. And that's a good way to evaluate, where the program's at. And, I think the NIL, like it or not, the programs now that have the strongest NIL packages are probably going to be your strongest programs. And that's why I don't understand too, and we're getting off the trail here maybe on my end, not yours, my end.
No, that's all right.
But I don't understand if I am a college coach, football, basketball, or whatever, to be like, hey, you know something? I'm against these guys getting paid. If you're Dabo, I may go on to the NFL because I just don't think it's right to pay players. They need to play for the name on the back or on the front or whatever, wherever it's at on your uniform on the front, I guess. Play for the name on the front and be happy they're getting a scholarship and all that. And I'm like, man, the quote Frank the Tank off Barstool Sports, you're just torpedoing everything. So I don't understand how that helps you in recruiting. I think the coaches would embrace it, and I'm sure that that's probably something too. You talk about what do happen in the visit. We've not even discussed NIL, but they have an NIL presentation when they go on these visits, and I'm sure it's something that was very attractive. North Carolina does a great job of that.
Yeah, NIL for North Carolina basketball is not an issue. All you have to do is just look at the players.
Yeah.
But all the schools have collectives now, and the kids know how much is in those collectives, and that's a big part of it. So Zayden High, 6'10", 225 pounds, number 46 player nationally in the class of 2023. Number 10, I'm going to use quotations, power forward, because I don't know if there are power forward. I don't think there are positions at forward anymore. They're just forward to me. He has committed to the University of North Carolina. He complements Simeon Wilcher in the class of 2023. For David Sisk, this is AJ. We appreciate you stopping by.